is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello, welcome to Friday the 19th of May's Teachers Talk Radio with me, Maxine House, as we start to talk all things resilience. What does resilience mean to you? What increases your resilience and what has affected?
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, wonderful to see a few of you join us already this evening. Sounding like I have an odd little bit of a lag. I hope you're hearing me okay. I'm just going to change that over. So, welcome to Teachers Talk Radio, Friday night Twilight show on the 19th of May. And following on and continuing the well-being theme and personal growth, where we've talked well-being, we've talked barriers. This evening, we're moving on to talk all things resilience. What does resilience mean to you? And resilience to me is something that's really important, and to us in the world of education, because like the title says, it is a tough gig. Whatever your job in education, whether you're a teacher, whether you're at the chalk face, there is a teacher, whether you're a head, whether you're a leader, whether you are a teaching assistant, whether you're working in on the playground or coming in to volunteer as a governor or helping at some point, it's a tough gig. Working in schools these days is really challenging. And so this whole idea of resilience is really, really important in my opinion. So this evening, really excited to be able to say that we should be being joined by a couple of really exciting guests. First up, in about 15 minutes, we should be joined by Emma. Emma is an English teacher in a secondary school, and one of those secondary schools that is it is pretty wonderful, and it serves an absolutely fantastic community. But it's faced some challenges. It's been through some major changes, had a huge turnover of school leaders, and would probably come in that bracket that you would describe as a challenging school. So it'll be really fascinating to talk to Emma and hear about some of the challenges that she's faced, and what she's found maybe has dented her resilience a little bit, but what has she been able to do to build her resilience? What's helped her, and what's kept her going and thriving and loving her job, and there with that opinion that teaching is, whilst it's so challenging and as corny as it sounds, is still the best job in the world. And then later on, we're going to be joined again by another teacher. And someone who definitely sees herself as a teacher. And while she sits in the head teacher role, still likes to go out and build relationships with the students in her school, and to speak to them and to know them by name, and to get in there and teach lessons, but also to lead her school as a head teacher. And Zoe's school is currently a middle school. Those of you that aren't familiar with that, as the whole world really is primary and secondary, middle schools span those two phases, with the last 2 years of primary, years 5 and 6, and the first 2 years of secondary, and is currently on a journey, or somewhere quite close to the beginning of the journey, and I hope Zoe can talk us a little bit more through that, of transition into secondary. So again, some of the brackets that you would describe as challenging school, certainly some of the challenges of education. So maybe she'll be able to talk to us, I'm hoping, about her own resilience. And the other thing I'd also love to hear about, and I'm sure both of these two will talk us through it as well, but what are we doing, and what are our teachers doing, and what can our teachers do to also build resilience in the children and young people who come to our schools? So fascinating stuff there to think all about resilience, and look forward to hearing from those two people as well later on tonight. So as we start thinking about resilience, let's have a little look of what resilience is. And that will lead us on to, I think, in education, why it's important. So I hear the word resilience come up a lot, and it comes up a lot in coaching. It comes up in a lot in conversations with other educators, and any meeting that you go to, any group of teachers, the word resilience, I just hear it bandied around a lot. Sometimes I hear people say, particularly when I'm working with younger teachers, I hear them say, "Oh, well, I just know I need to be more resilient." And I find that really interesting to think about that idea of just becoming more resilient, as if it's some magic that can happen. And I think it's important to unpick that and try and see what is it that resilience means, and why is it that it's important. So whole idea of resilience goes back to broadly around the 1970s. It was talked about in research very much, and was seen very much back then as a personal quality, something that was fixed, that we either have or we don't have. And the word was used very much linked to studies about vulnerable children, and those that did better than they'd been expected to, those who did really, really well, were deemed to be more resilient. Fast forward to 2012, fast forward to the current century, and the American Psychological Association are defining resilience as the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, behavioural flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. So let's just unpick that a little bit. So it's about going through difficult or challenging experiences, something really tough happening, and being able to get through that because of a degree of flexibility. And that flexibility can be in our thinking, our mental flexibility. It's a little bit about having that emotional resilience, and also thinking about how our behaviours, about how we'll adapt to those changes and those huge challenges that we might be facing. And that definition really sees resilience much more as a process. It's something that's not fixed. It suggests that it's something that we can build and develop. And I think that's the really good news for us as educators and us as teachers, because yes, it is a tough gig. Yes, it is hugely challenging. And I think this news that resilience is, or this research belief that resilience is something that we can grow and something we can develop, is hugely positive. And I think it's just about having that reflection, pausing, stopping, and thinking, what can we do? And what is it that makes us a little bit more resilient? So, resilient people still go through all of those difficult emotions. They still feel sad. They still feel stressed. They still feel, and they challenges that they're facing are still as real and as acute. But their resilience enables them to get through it, enables them to keep going, keep making progress, persevering, continuing, and really crucially, the big thing about resilience is that whole phoenix from the flames thing, that resilience can also mean that someone goes through a huge challenge, really, really big challenge. And actually, due to the resilience, due to the fact that they're persevering, some of the things that are helping them, supporting them to be more resilient, they actually mean that they come through that with learning and with growth. So without entering the realms of toxic positivity, without that whole or at least look at the positive, look on the bright side, which is, I think when we're talking about positive thinking, which is a key part of resilience, I think it's really important that we don't get confused with that idea of toxic positivity and look and positive thinking. They're very, very different. So positive thinking is much more based in reality and what's actually happening, and seeing the positive side of that rather than banning any of the emotions or the thoughts that we think are negative. But that whole thought about positivity is hugely, hugely powerful, and that growth that can come through there. So I really look forward to hearing from our guests about some of those ideas of what has made them more resilient. So On to why we need to be more, well, why resilience is important, and why for us as teachers and as educators, why it's needed. Well, I don't need to sit here as we're coming up. I guess lots of you are a week away from half term. You're all here on a Friday at the moment, at the end of a long week in SAT season and the start of GCSE season, whichever phase you're in. And I started to talk to you about challenges because you're there. You know you're feeling those challenges. You know it's tough. You know that there are pressures in exam results, and in an ideal world, would some of those pressures dissipate a little? Would those pressures be less acute? Would we have much more in the realms of high challenge and low threat, and not quite facing that quite so quite so abruptly as we really are? And then another of those resilience testers, and I wonder if either of our guests will bring this up today, but Ofsted. And it was really interesting this week. I was at the schools and academies show at Excel and heard Ofsted National Director speaking. And again, I think it's pretty brave to put yourself in front of a room full of teachers when you are there from Ofsted and not the most popular group at the moment. And I think many teachers, I don't think there are many that haven't, and certainly many school leaders have really felt at the sharp end of stress and have had their resilience tested by Ofsted. And Ofsted's something at the moment that there's a huge call for change, but is that change coming? So big questions asked about whether the single word judgments were going to go, and a whole load of explanation about how the single word judgments aren't important, and there's actually all this prose that's really important, and we should be focusing on those. And I'm really kicking myself for not asking this follow-up question about, well, with all of that benefit of everything else that's there, why have the single word judgments then? It was really interesting. He almost talked out of the need for the single word judgment in his explanation that was justifying why they were being kept. Anyway, that was my opinion of that, and it doesn't look like change is coming anytime desperately soon. So again, not something that's on the horizon very soon. So if it doesn't, if we do still have Ofsted, if we do have exam challenges, and we do, as teachers, have some of those other challenges too around student behaviour. And I know this varies enormously between schools. I know there are many schools for whom working in the classroom is really straightforward. There are strong systems and structures and processes and strong senior leaders making classroom teachers' job one that is really workable and based on strong relationships. But we do know that a bit like the video that was posted on Twitter a while ago with the reality of what a teacher's day might be, we do know that there are also many schools where teachers they go in to teach, they've planned, prepared a lesson, all sorted, it's going to be wonderful. They've got this whole host of learning, and before they've even started, that has come unstuck because there is a student there who's not in the right place for that learning, and is challenging. And what a challenge for teachers to face that as well, and what a huge need for an immense amount of resilience. So it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig. Even if we had this edutopia where teachers were applauded in the street, where the press was just continually full of praise for the teaching profession, where parents were continually supportive of school, where children behaved amazingly well, where the inspectorate was really supportive and just came and looked and had a discussion about strengths and areas for development, came back and checked in. where exam results were a bonus, where we worked together to help children to do the best, because that's important, but there wasn't any immense pressure about that, where there was high challenge and low threat. In that edutopia, maybe we'd have less call for resilience, but we are a little way away from that particular edutopia, in my opinion. And do challenge if that's not your experience. If you are finding anything different, if you think it is an edutopia and there's no need for resilience, have I got this completely wrong? I don't think so, because I think, like the title of the show says, resilience is important because it's a tough gig. Okay, right. I think there might be my first guest, lovely Emma, due to join us any time now, and I'm just waiting to see if I have a message for her and if she's here. I can't see her at the moment, so I'm just going to keep going for a little while, and when she's ready, when she's here and she's managed to attach herself into Podbean and join us, hopefully she'll be able to join us and we can then have a chat. Anybody else who's on here who wanted to call in, if you've got something that you want to add about resilience, you're really welcome to. Ah, brilliant. Paul, I've got a really nice comment here, super comment from Paul. We have a problem with teachers trying to teach, okay, and things not being in their place, like sexual orientation. So there's some interesting, some different challenges there, Paul, that pupils and that teachers face. Okay, right. So again, huge challenges for teachers. And if any teachers are facing things like homophobia, racism, and any other discrimination at all, what another angle of huge challenges for teachers to be facing. It's really, really difficult. And again, fantastic occupation. That's why we're all still here. That's why we haven't, particularly those of us that were at the schools and academies show, we haven't sloped off and joined accountancy firms. But really, really important we've stayed there with teaching, because we've got faith in it. So if we are going to work on our resilience, what are some of the things that we're going to do? We're going to have a look at one particular thing that we can have a look at if we need to work on our resilience. So yeah, we know in an ideal world, maybe we wouldn't need to do all of this, but we would still have other challenges, even if our classroom life was sorted. So thinking about our resilience, point number one is about self-awareness. So one of the things that people who struggle with resilience tend to find is a problem is they can sometimes be less self-aware. I think I can see our speaker joining us. They're not quite sure what is happening. If we've got the courage to actually look in the mirror and look at ourselves, know what it is that presents us with challenges, know what it is that makes us feel upset, know what it is that helps us to then get through that, then that can really increase our levels of resilience. If we turn to our inner world, building self-awareness, thinking about what it is that's helpful for us, thinking about some of those thought patterns sometimes. So again, if we go to pupil behaviour, and this is one, it's not right when students behave badly. Absolutely not right when students behave badly. And it's not right when students disrupt behaviour. And sometimes as teachers, we can assume that those students are misbehaving because they've got it absolutely in for us. And in some cases, it is absolutely totally correct. And I think sometimes students do have issues with particular teachers, but sometimes it's really not personal. It is about students struggling with, not willing to accept that level of authority, not being able to access learning, something that's happened earlier on in the day. And as teachers, that self-awareness to know that that's not about us as human beings can sometimes really help us to be a little bit more resilient. Now, that's not saying that any of that poor behaviour is okay. The other thing about self-awareness sometimes, and this whole link between our, or just understanding what it is that we find really difficult that can help, and knowing about this, is if we know that we're always going to find it really, really difficult when we get any feedback that's not going to be positive, then if we know that's the case about us, then we can do something about it. We can make sure that we are set up for receiving that feedback properly when we know that that's going to come. If we know about that, the more things we know about ourselves and about the situations that we're in and how they're going to affect us, then the better that we are going to be. So I'm just going to take a pause there just for a moment, just to play something briefly from one of our advertisers. Bear with me just for a moment.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
Okay, so fascinating there. Our sponsor, all about wellbeing for students and about a programme that you can put in place for students. Really interested to hear any of your thoughts as well, not just about how we as teachers can boost our own wellbeing, and our own resilience, but what can we also do for students and their resilience as well? Because again, more resilient learners definitely achieve better. Okay, so next one, point 2. Let's have a little think about the next point, about how we can improve our resilience. So if we've talked first of all about self-awareness, about knowing some of the things that trigger us, about knowing some of the things that will upset us, about taking that view, about knowing actually that some things aren't personal for us, that little bit of self-awareness. The next point is about taking a balanced, optimistic view and trying to have a focus on positive thinking. Right, and here's where being positive doesn't mean toxic positivity. So taking an optimistic view of a situation, thinking, for example, about Ofsted coming in to see your lesson. And I know it's not the hour-long lessons anymore where any teacher is required to put on a big show. I know it is a walkthrough. But even so, these people are coming into your room, or imagine that it is a deep dive into the subject that you lead. And my goodness, if you're leading a subject in secondary, you're probably paid to do it. If you're leading a subject in primary, you may well not be. So again, we know that that's really, really difficult. So again, being what we describe as a realistic optimist means actually thinking about the optimistic views and the slightly pessimistic views and taking a little bit of a balance there. Trying to think about whether you can examine the facts as well. So again, thinking about what it is that you've got to talk about your subject. And a realistic optimist pays close attention to any negative information. So anything that you know you're not sure about, anything where you know you're not totally confident, that's potentially going to be a little bit of negative information. That's going to be something that is there that you are going to need to be aware of, and not just sort of drift through thinking everything's wonderful. However, a realistic optimist would probably think about all the things that they actually do know. Think about all the things that you know are great. And most of us, actually, I think if we look and we're really honest, can see so many things in our schools or the subjects that we lead that we are really proud of. And again, thinking about other situations like that, thinking about what are the positives, what are the good things, what might happen if you're thinking optimistically. So I might show this information and it actually might be well received. It might be a good chance to really show what I can do. Again, that's that realistic optimist, finding a balance and thinking flexibly, not letting themselves fall into a trap of thinking it's all doom and gloom and everything's going to go terribly. And again, that's such a huge thing to think. Again, unlike pessimists, realistic optimists, while they do pay attention to some of that negative information, they don't then get caught up on it. And they do instead think about potential positive outcomes. They think about what's good and what could happen and how that might work. Another really interesting thing that you can do, and another thing about how you can boost your resilience, is to look from different perspectives. So again, really stressful situation. It can be really hard to do this when, say, for example, it's a parent that is being really, really difficult. And it's really easy to take that personally, because quite often parents do come in and speak to teachers and they are absolutely fired up because it's their child, that they are really, really upset about something. If we can be flexible thinkers, and this is asking a really big thing, and I have to do a full disclaimer to say that this is something that I find really, really difficult. But can you look at that from different perspectives and just think about how other people might be viewing this? Are they necessarily judging you negatively? Or might they be actually just really interested in what's happening with their child? How can you look at that from different perspectives? Again, all things that don't make the difficult stuff go away. They don't make it suddenly easy. They don't mean that stress just suddenly vanishes. But they do mean that we're resilient and that we can keep coming through. Another really important thing is about looking for the facts, looking for what's actually true, what are actual real things, as opposed to what might be things that we're just assuming. And again, that's really important as well, looking and thinking about what's true and what's actually real, because quite often when we're feeling really stressed about something and we're really, really up against it, we can make all manner of assumptions. And sometimes what our brain then does when we've made those assumptions, and they can run away and be quite negative things, we then start to look for evidence to back up those assumptions, which starts to reinforce our potentially inaccurate views. So really good questions that we can ask ourselves, or we can ask each other. Some really simple but strong, effective questions are, well, how true is that? What are the facts? How do you know? And that can all help us check for facts and what is fact and what's assumption. And the thing to be aware of, and this is that self-awareness, but this is self-awareness for everybody, is that our negative bias makes negative assumptions more common than positive ones. So you know what it's like. You'll always see this with other people when you've got something right 10 times and got it wrong once, and they focus in on that. And again, when you've been at parents' evening and you've talked all night and you've said a million things that are really positive and have landed really well, and you know you're proud of those, you'll know you're really pleased that you said them. And then there's that one thing that you think, oh my goodness, I wish I'd never said that. Our negative bias makes us focus on those negatives. It's just one of those things. It's just something that happens. And I think it's really important, therefore, when we are questioning whether something's fact or whether it's an assumption, to also be aware that those negative assumptions are more common than positive ones. And again, as teachers, if we're reflective, and the way that we're always reflective on our lessons, it's really helpful sometimes to be reflective like that on our thinking. And that brings us next to thinking about something else that can really help our resilience, and that's our support network. That's the people in our lives. Those people when we're really struggling, who are the people that can help us? We know that we are still going to feel those difficult emotions. We're still going to be sad. We're still going to be stressed. We're still going to be upset, distraught. We're still going to potentially feel rejected, hurt. But if we've got a strong support network, that's a really key factor in increasing resilience. And it does it in a number of different ways. Does it because we will hopefully be surrounding ourselves in people that help us to get through. Now, helpful people who help us to get through aren't assuming that we're totally competent and diving in to rescue us and bombarding us with advice and or just justifying why we think everything's difficult. They're not going to be people who are rescuing, who are running in with a superhero cape on. The people that we really want helping us are people who are acting in that support manner, who are challenging us and challenge in our thinking, and also asking us questions like, how true is that? How true is it? You know, which are facts, which are opinions, which are assumptions that you've made there? And again, having more people in our network who can do that sort of thing, the better we're going to be. And again, the more resilient we're going to be. The more interpersonal relationships we've got as well, the wider our vision on the world. And that changes the way we see the world and the way that we see ourselves. And that idea of connection and support and our links with others are really crucial and really important in our developing our resilience. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what has dented your resilience. But most importantly, I'd love to hear what it is that's boosted your resilience. I hope that one of you will join in, even call in and give us some thoughts on what has boosted your resilience. I'm going to come to the
This
note.
programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
SATs have made the news again as many media outlets report on allegations that children were distraught after the reading paper. The BBC website reports that parents and teachers of Year 6 pupils said the paper was difficult and that it had left some pupils in tears. In response to concerns, the Department for Education said it worked to ensure that all tests are appropriate. Whilst some parents took to social media to highlight concerns, a few also acknowledged that the tests might be good in a way to have some kind of tests before GCSE, but the schools in general are under too much pressure to perform well. Copies of the test paper cannot be published until all pupils in Year 6 have had the chance to take it. Sarah Hannafin, Head of Policy for the National Association of Head Teachers, said the union was very concerned about the paper and it would be raising concerns with the Standards and Testing Agency. In Scotland, Edinburgh University students have criticised the institution's response to a marking boycott. According to BBC News, students fear their work will not be read as the university plans to continue awarding degrees without necessary expertise to cope with the UK-wide industrial action. The marking boycott is part of the latest phase of industrial action by members of the University and College Union at 145 institutions across the UK. Union members are refusing to undertake marking duties and assessment-related work. In response, universities are considering a number of measures, including changing marking guidelines and basing final grades on work already submitted. Many students have expressed sympathy towards staff, but also frustration that industrial action has had little impact on anyone but students, as universities have not reopened negotiations. The University of Edinburgh said it has robust measures in place to reduce the impact of industrial action and that work, including dissertations, would be read. Schools Week comment on teacher burnout after a report from Wellbeing Service Education Support shows a quarter of leaders, teachers and support staff said additional responsibilities were adding on average 4 to 6 hours to their working week. 15% of staff said they were spending an extra 7 to 10 hours supporting pupils. The collapse in support services feeding into schools, including creaking mental health support and overwhelmed SEND services, has left schools and their staff struggling to cope. Jeff Barton, General Secretary of School Leaders Union ASCL, said schools had become the de facto and unofficial branch of social and healthcare services, but that a lack of training, resources or capacity was putting staff under considerable workload stress. The most common additional responsibilities included offering pupils and colleagues emotional support and dealing with difficult pupil behaviour. More than 1/4 of staff surveyed said they had prepared food for pupils who didn't have any, and 41% said they had purchased supplies such as pens, paper and school bags. In the same YouGov survey, 2/3 of school staff said public bodies such as CAMS and social services had been unable to offer pupils support. Further details of the findings can be found on the Schools Week website. The Guardian reported on a proposal to recruit school leavers into healthcare service apprenticeships, which would allow tens of thousands of doctors and nurses to train on the job. The NHS workforce plan could see up to 1 in 10 doctors and 1/3 of student nurses trained through this vocational path in coming years. The alternative route would circumvent the standard undergraduate or graduate route. The plans have been met with criticism by unions, but Amanda Pritchard, Chief Executive of NHS England, has been speaking to pupils at a North East comprehensive school, where she encouraged pupils to earn while they learn, and highlighted the 350 different roles available within the NHS. Finally, in Wales, the BBC reports that the increasing cost of food means school caterers are struggling to deliver on the Welsh Government plan for universal free school meals. The unit price was set with an assumption about possible cost increases, but Education Minister Jeremy Miles said the world has obviously moved on and a further review was needed. The current rate of around £2.90 per child in a primary school is being described as no longer viable, as price increases of 20% on items like milk, cheese, fruit and vegetables take their toll. The Universal Free School Meals Plan is being rolled out in phases to all primary schools, although a target for every child in reception Year 1 and Year 2 to be offered a free school meal by April has been missed. The policy has been welcomed, but challenges needed to be acknowledged. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I've been searching for crazy technology. The tech I found ranges from rather funny to actually quite useful. Let's see if I can blow your mind. Everyone has probably used Google Translate at some point, even if it's just to translate a word into another language and back again to see if it changes. Well, the Google Pixel earbuds paired with the Pixel phone allow you to switch on conversation mode. Now what is being said to you in a foreign language is translated into your earbuds in real time. What you say is translated and projected via your phone. You do need an Android 6.0 or higher to do this, but this has potential to be a game changer for communicating not only when travelling, but in hospitality too. Next up is a quirkier invention, Smarty Pans. There aren't many things you can't connect to an app, and the frying pan is now joining the club. The Smarty Pan has a built-in scale to weigh your food as you add it to the pan, a handle that tells you when the pan is at temperature, and the app guides you through how to cook a meal you're preparing. Also, the nutritional content of your meal is calculated by the app. There's no advertised price for this pan yet, but keep your eyes peeled. It replaces a cookbook, reading the nutrition on a packet, and your kitchen scales, as long as you fry everything. My final crazy technology is the Hush Me. This is an invention for those concerned about being overheard by others when talking on their phone or other connected devices. It works by muffling your voice so others can't hear you, keeping private conversations private. Genius, I hear you say. I need one so I can work during my commute. Before you break out the credit card, it is a rather chunky device you wrap around your whole head. I'd describe it as a pair of large headphones that connect to a cup to cover your mouth. At just over £180 and making you look like Darth Vader, you may want to do a bit of research first. Do you know of any crazy tech? Do you own any? As always, why not get in touch at TT Radio Official? I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Wow, the news there was just totally talked about why we need so much resilience in this job, and that just threw up, didn't it? So many challenges that we face as teachers on a daily basis. So again, the more that I look at and I think about this whole idea of resilience, the more you can just see how important it is. And again, building resilience, what can we do? So again, back to how we can build resilience. So if we think about resilience in the pupils that we teach, think about that reading paper. And yes, I've also heard of many stories of primary school children in some of the schools that I've dropped into and helped this week who have said that children had actually been crying. And again, they tended to be children who were expecting to be able to finish the paper and expecting to be able to glide through it. And that was really interesting to me, thinking about children, and do we give children enough chances to not necessarily get it right? And I wonder back about that. I wonder about the amount of pressure and the amount sometimes of expectation sometimes children feel, whether that's real or whether that's perceived to them. How clear and explicit do we need to be about this to show actually sometimes you won't finish something, sometimes some things will be really hard, and that's how life is. And I've seen some schools doing that so superbly over the last few years, actually giving children some really tough lessons in life. I was really fortunate this week to be able to watch an early careers teacher teach who's in year 4. And one of the things that I liked, and again, coming from a background where I've taught mostly older ones early on in my career, and it's been more recently I've worked with younger ones, watching her manner with those young children, and she was really quite direct with them and really quite matter of fact, but she absolutely believed that they could all do this maths. It was about finding area, and she'd put some really lovely scaffolds in for some children still to be counting the squares where others were using the formula. And what really struck me was how getting it wrong, completely messing it up, was totally okay, and how she'd tell them that they'd made a really good mistake and that was going to really help with our learning. And I really like that, those two things, that optimism, that real belief that they were going to be able to do it and they were going to get through, and they were all part of this team who were really upbeat about it. Tying that into her also, and it's just totally okay to get it wrong, just made that work. And again, it was a different teaching style to I've seen before with younger children, and I just thought it was amazing. And again, what a privilege to be able to watch young teachers. So anyway, back to building resilience, and that view. I'd really love anybody else who's around who could either drop a message onto Twitter, comment on my post about resilience, and say, and I'm at Maxine Coaching on Twitter if you'd like to comment on that post, and I can see what you think, or on the Teacher Talk Radio post, or join us in here this evening and comment, or I'd really love to talk to any of you. But again, any of your thoughts about building resilience, either in the children that we teach or and even better in us as teachers facing those enormous challenges that we're facing. So, on to a few other thoughts about how we can really boost our resilience. So this goes back to something I've talked about quite a lot, and that more resilient people tend to have a clear sense of purpose. And the things that they're working to achieve, no matter how difficult they are, no matter how many knocks they get in those, they actually know why they're going in that direction. They know what that sense of purpose is. They know that their general direction is in line with their values. And I think this is where it can be difficult in teaching. If in the current education landscape, some of the things that are creating challenges, if some of those things like that massive drive about exam results, maybe, I mean, I think we agree we want children to do as, and students and young people to do as well as they can, but some of that high accountability, some of those Ofsted challenges, how do they sit with our values and our morals? And I think sometimes that's why it's difficult as well. But this whole idea about finding a sense of purpose and knowing why you're doing what you're doing will mean that you will be far less likely to be discouraged by your problems and more motivated to learn from the experiences where things are difficult and keep going. And again, things about having a sense of purpose. That again is about having a support system around you. And it is also about what it is you're doing and what it is that you're really trying to work towards. And that's why, again, I think that resilience, and that's again part of school, because we've got a strong values and purpose. So again, here's one. Claire, thank you so much. Claire, one of my previous guests, and here joining us with a comment. So Claire from an AP. For me, moving job to work in a setting where the whole school values of purpose and my values are aligned has really helped my resilience. So yes, when it goes wrong, you're really, really aligned. I feel like now I have a stable base to build on because I'm not fighting with myself anymore, and there's not a mismatch in things I believe in and what's asked of me anymore. So again, really interesting. And how many times does making the choices in life that are in line with your values? I have to say, going into the east of London, and going through the city, coming out through Canary Wharf and seeing those big accountancy companies, and it just made me reflect a little bit on the challenges that I've faced as a teacher and as a head, and I see my colleagues facing with me, and I thought, would I have stayed as resilient and in it for that long with one of those big accountancy firms or banks, or would I perhaps not have had quite that sense of purpose? And I wonder about that. No criticism if there's not ever. Come on, let's be honest. There's no accountants or bankers listening to Teachers Talk Radio. And but if any of you have got friends who are bankers or accountants, absolutely no offence at all. But I do think that actually maybe that's why as teachers we're still in it. We're still learning and growing because of that really important sense of purpose. So again, other things that are good and help us with our resilience, it's being healthy and having a healthy lifestyle. That's huge. So again, I posted about running, and I'm going to be a bore about running and make no apology for it. And I've been a real critic of runners throughout my life when I wasn't one. And moaned about them being horrendous running bores. But running does a number of things for me in terms of helping my resilience. That physical fitness and that knowing that there is an outlet and a place where I can go and have a real head clear. That helps my resilience enormously. And I've found that knowing that at the end of a tough day I can go for a run, or even better, and sometimes slightly unusually because I'm not a morning person, I can get up in the morning and have a run then as well. That can set me up for the day. Or if I've got got a challenge, and I'm quite fortunate now that I can work a little bit more flexibly, and I can fit some of that outside time. I'm not a treadmill person. It has to be running outside and actually running to feel like I'm getting somewhere. That's helpful, and that's definitely about resilience. And there's also quite a lot of research out there about mood and resilience and coping and what you eat, and whether we like it or not. It is the healthy stuff. It does make us feel better. It does. It's our 5 a day, decent food. It definitely helps with our resilience. So a couple of other things that boost and help resilience. And again, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you think. Got a couple of new people jumping and joining in there now, which is fabulous to hear from you. What about some of the things like, actually, I guess, links again to purpose, but doing some stuff that actually serves your community and that helps you. So here's an interesting one for me in serving the community. I've become a school governor now. As a head and as a teacher, I always found working with governors extremely challenging, which is why I thought I'm going to have a go and have a look at what it looks like from the other side. But I do find that gives me a good sense of purpose, that volunteering, giving my time and trying to do something that is positive. It's not all linked to pay. And I would imagine that other people, other Teachers Talk Radio presenters, also find that this is a real positive. Again, those that are actually part of the school community, enjoy it, go and do that challenging job, and really, really enjoy that little bit of creativity that comes with doing the radio show, and also start to again be able to put something back and do something to help others. All things that help our resilience, all of those things. So again, fascinating. Can't wait to hear from you. Can't wait to hear what helps your resilience. So very, very soon we're going to have Zoe joining us to talk about her resilience. What is it that helps her resilience? So she probably, I'm suspecting, talk to us about why she wasn't available at the beginning of the show and why she wants to talk later on. And I think that's probably quite resilience related. And again, I hope she's going to share with us a few things maybe that have presented challenges to her resilience, but it's mostly that whole resilience stuff. What makes you more resilient? So we'll be hearing from Zoe just in shortly. So again, some other things that can help us build our resilience. Having confidence in our abilities and believing that we can cope with the stresses in life can play a really important part in resilience. So again, sometimes we can assume and sometimes we can have this narrative about, well, I'm a resilient person or I'm not resilient. And I think sometimes those negative voices in our head, when we start telling ourselves, I can't do this, I can't get through, I can't see the next stage, I'm not a great teacher, I'm not good at my job. Those negative voices, I think sometimes it's really, really important to challenge those voices, those negative voices. So I've worked with lots of teachers who have said, well, made all sorts of assumptions about things that have meant they are a poor teacher, or they can't cope, or they are a poor head teacher. And actually, when you pick it down, and it goes back to what I was saying before about look at the facts, look at this in perspective, look at the number of people that are actually sharing and giving you that feedback. How accurate is that feedback? Let's have a look. Quite often, those negative voices in your head can be really, really damaging. And so many times, they're not actually based on fact. They're your assumptions. They're those bits of negative bias. They're where you hear the negative voices speaking up much more loudly. So really interesting, this view on the negative voices speak loudest. Again, coming out of school and remembering some of the challenges, some of the feedback, some of the difficult messages. I can really remember getting caught up in that whole, I can't do this, I'm not very good at it, I'm not a great teacher, I'm not a good head, all those sorts of things. Whereas actually, if you can practice replacing those voices with positive ones, I can do this, I know I can do this, I've had this positive bit of feedback, looking at that, using that, and thinking about all the things you're good at, believing in your abilities, that's really important. And there's a lot of research that shows that self-esteem plays an important role in coping with stress and recovering from difficult events, which is just absolutely what resilience is about. Resilience is about coping with stress and recovering from difficult events. It's about being the phoenix from the flames, coming out the other side even better. And if you can boost your self-esteem by reminding yourself of your strengths and your accomplishments, all of the things that you've done well, write them down, list them, be really, really clear about them. That is a huge help, and that is a huge thing that can really help your resilience. Next, we come on to embracing change. Oh my goodness. Many people hate change. Many people find change really difficult. And it's sometimes quite helpful if you've got, going back to the first thing that we said about self-awareness, sometimes it can be helpful, even if you know that you don't like change. So you know that something is causing you to have a wobble because it's change. Actually recognizing that and helping you to think, how can I be more flexible? How can I learn to be adaptable? How can I look at any of those other things? If you can be flexible, if you have that flexibility, if you know how to be more adaptable, if you begin to look for the facts and go, well, okay, this change, it is difficult. I know I don't like change, but if I look at the facts, actually, I can see there's some planning and preparation involved. I can see that actually the facts are showing me there's a good chance it's going to be okay. That's really, really helpful. So learning how to be more adaptable, you'll be better equipped to respond when faced with a life crisis. So if you know, you understand how it was going to be difficult. Resilient people often use those events as a chance to actually branch out into new directions. So one of the things that I always say is instead of when a wave is coming, instead of being crashed by that wave, think about it, think how you can ride that wave and be a really, really good surfer. That's a key thing about resilience. Of course, to be a good surfer, you also need a surfboard and you need to know how to surf. So again, it is about knowing, it's about thinking, what can you do? What's happened to you? Optimism always comes up, and I mentioned it before, not that toxic positivity, but actually maintaining a hopeful outlook, being realistic, thinking about what are the positive things that can happen. Doesn't mean ignoring the problem, but it does mean focusing, thinking about positive outcomes, being realistic and knowing that this storm shall pass, that things will turn out all right. And really crucial, thinking about your own needs. So the people who are the most resilient sometimes, and they may or may not be willing to admit this, but I don't think there's any shame at all in being a little bit selfish, and self-care isn't actually selfish. So the things that you need to do in order to do your job well, cope with the stresses, what is it you need to do? So again, I'm really lucky to work with a fabulous ECT who it feels embarrassed sometimes about going home at 4 o'clock, and he's felt like he ought to be hanging around later, whereas actually, no, just go home, find some strategies so that children are self-marking, sort out your planning nice and quickly, go and have a nice evening, have a lovely weekend away, and come in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to teach your children the next morning. That's doing them a better service than you working your fingers to the bone. And again, that whole thing about what does nurturing and looking after yourself mean to you, because we're all different, and what helps me probably wouldn't help you. So I would love to hear from you. Love, love, love to hear from you. So what I'm going to do, I'm hoping that Zoe's going to get ready and start to have a chat with us shortly, because I'd love to hear from Zoe about what she does for her resilience and starts to have a little bit of a chat with us. So, hello, Zoe.
Hello, Maxine. It's lovely to talk to you.
Oh, how nice to hear from you, and how nice to speak to you. It has been too long, so full disclaimer, we are former colleagues, and lots of my other guests. You're someone that I'm very fortunate to have known and to work with in the head teacher circuit. So thank you for joining us to talk all things resilience this evening.
It's my pleasure, Maxine. My pleasure. It's a topic really close to my heart.
Okay. So for you, what does resilience mean to you? What's your sort of key thoughts and definitions and meaning when you hear the word resilience? What does that mean?
Okay, so I had an interesting entry into headship. I tend to say that I got into headship by accident, which isn't strictly true. I was deputy head in a school, and I hadn't been deputy for very long. I think just 2 terms when my head teacher went off sick, long-term sick.
Okay.
So, and it was very sudden. He said he was there one day, and I said, "Okay, see you tomorrow." And he said, "No, you won't," and I didn't ever see him again.
Oh my goodness. Baptism of fire.
Yes, it was a bit. And what I realised very, very soon, sorry, that dog in the background. What I realised really, really early on in my acting headship was how vulnerable the school was when the head had no clue what she was doing.
Yeah.
And I was having to learn everything all at once. I had no idea how to turn off the fire alarm. That was hilarious. When the fire alarm went off, everyone looked at me. I had no idea where the button was. And we had an Ofsted 9 weeks after I became acting head, where I had to say, well, I don't know what to hide or where to hide it. And half the time the inspector was having to teach me how to find that report or that piece of information. And what it taught me was that the school was at its most vulnerable when the head had just suddenly disappeared like that.
Yeah.
That made the school so vulnerable. So I was really fortunate that inspector was so good with me. If it had been the type of inspectors that I've come across since, it wouldn't have been the same with the school. It would not have been the same. So that taught me really early on in my headship a massive lesson about the importance of the head being healthy and sane and able to make good judgments quickly and not in that place where you can't think. And it happens to us all, where you're so busy, you can't think, you can't focus, you can't make a good decision. And that's a really dangerous place for the school. If you love your school, you do not want to leave it there. No. And so I was kind of, in a really unlucky way, very lucky to have learned that lesson straight away in my headship. It, slapped me round the face. And and I have therefore been, I guess some people might say I'm a little bit selfish about it, but I'm pretty disciplined about really looking after myself, because it's horribly expensive for a school when the head's off sick as well. Like, it costs a lot of money. This is not good for a school's budget. There's nothing good for the school if the head is unable to function well. It's dangerous. No. So I put a lot of effort into making sure that I do what you say, that I turn up at school every morning full of enthusiasm. I don't work till the middle of the night. I just don't do it. I won't do it. If it isn't finished, that's it. It's not getting finished then. They'll have to wait. What are they going to do? And I maintain an interest out of school that is all-encompassing. I know originally you'd asked me to join you about 6ish, and I couldn't.
Yeah, I had you.
And I couldn't because at 6 o'clock on a Friday, I am only ever in one place, and that is sat on the back of my horse. I'm afraid I was so jumping at 6 o'clock, so I couldn't speak.
And quite right too. And again, Zoe, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to get you to talk a little bit more about some of that. So again, one of the reasons I asked you specifically to join us on resilience is because that's something that you have always shared and always held really, really close, and very true for heads, actually. It's important that they're in the right place, and modelling that school culture to all of your staff. Being presumably that you can see that it's really important for your year 7 teachers and your year 8 teachers, and are you still middle, Zoe, or have you morphed into
No,
secondary yet?
no, we're a middle school still.
Your middle school, so your year 5 teachers and everybody who's there, for them to be doing the same, so
Yeah.
that they're working hard, but they're working smart, and they're being well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. When I'm at school, I don't waste time. I work hard
Okay.
because I have to leave. I cannot be faffing around after school. No, he needs his dinner.
Yes, totally.
So you can't have an animal suffering because you haven't quite got your act together. So I have to leave, and I leave. And that's what we do. And it means that I've got a really excellent way of just chilling out, because on a beautiful evening like tonight, who wouldn't want to be, clearing a couple of show jumps or going for a lovely wander around the countryside, which we do a lot. It's perfect. But even in the dead of winter, I still do it. 5:30, 6ish, I'm out the door and I'm going to go and ride my horse. That's what I'm doing.
Goodness. Well, thank goodness for decent lighting. That's one of the things that I say to you there. And again, something else about the hobby, because again, think about that interest. What is it about horses that makes them for you? And horses aren't going to be for everybody. So there will be many listeners who are listening this evening going, no, right, that interest, I could do with something that gives me a boost to get out the door and makes me have to do it, because otherwise work can expand to fill the time. And I also need something else. What is it about horses that makes it that really good, resilient, boosting interest?
I can't think about school while I'm trying to ride. That's
Okay.
It's completely different, and it's real leveling. I will ride with people 20 years older than me and 20 years younger than me, and it's completely level. I meet loads of different people, you're chatting away, having conversations which are totally non-school based. And it's completely all-encompassing. When you're riding, you really cannot be thinking about that year 8 child that told you to go forward and what are you going to do about it. It's not the time. You have to concentrate on what you're doing, or you'll be eating sand. So, it's the distraction. It's the way it draws you in from the second you're there. And I think you just need to find something that you love that does that for you. I mean, for me, of course, it's exercise as well. The horse doesn't do all the work, by the way, everyone. It's great exercise. It gets your heart pumping, the adrenaline flowing. It does all of that. And for me, it deeply soothes my soul to be anywhere near my horse. So, yeah, it's what you need.
That soul soothing thing is also quite interesting, isn't it? So there's the getting there to get him his dinner, and I know how demanding these animals can be. There is then the concentration element when you're trying to organise yourself to do something as challenging as navigate round a course of show jumps. But there's also that communication side, isn't there? And again, that idea about animals being really soothing, I think, is fascinating as well in boosting resilience.
I think the very act of, even just stroking an animal or grooming him, as you have to do before you get on, all of that, they're deeply ritualistic and calming by their very nature. You cannot just buzz round a horse like you do in your housework. It's, my mare used to get thoroughly antsy with me, Oi, you, stand still.
Yes.
And that is in and of itself, it's very calming. It's physical as opposed to cerebral. Although I still have lessons and I love learning new stuff, but I'm learning physical stuff. And I think that is a huge part of it as well. I'm swapping roles there, and that's great.
You then take on the role of the learner.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is fascinating, actually, isn't it, as well? That whole leveler and that you being a learner.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually helps me hugely with kids the next day. Actually, if I come across a frustration where I don't seem to quite get it, how did my instructor help me with that? How can I help kids with that? I think all of that hugely helps me in my job. But most of all, keeps me absolutely sane. So the next day I go back in, I've still got the buzz from, whatever we did the night before, and I'm greeting the kids with, a real happy face. I'm pleased to see them.
So the children that you meet, you sometimes share a little bit about your experiences, what you've been doing.
Yeah, the cheeky Watsits. They all know if I'm covering a lesson, their quickest way to get 10 minutes downtime is to ask me how my horse is.
and I know one of the things is about the way you work in your school, Zoe, is you're not someone that is anywhere in an ivory tower. You are continually walking the corridors and around and about, and you are very much there in the classroom and with the children.
Well, yeah, that's because I find my office is quite a boring place to be. I proper get the fidgets, so yeah.
Oh my goodness! Well, there are all manner of different topics that we could be covering here around additional needs and support and teaching and learning strategies as well, Zoe. You are the gift as a guest. Just thinking back around resilience and around any of those children that you work with, and also your staff, so either all children or staff, what is it that you think you can use from your own approach to resilience to encourage that in other people, that kind of leading from the top as a head, where you get them to do that approach? Because a lot of your children probably aren't going to go horse riding, and a lot of your staff certainly aren't going to go horse riding. So what is it? What are the things that you do to use your experience, that very real resilience booster for you, to help them with their resilience?
So one is have your cut-off point, whether that is your child doing their homework. Once they've done it for the 30 minutes they're meant to be doing it, then have the cut-off point. Don't drive yourself wild not being able to get something. Come back with fresh eyes. I would say that to members of staff as well. I say that to them all the time. Do not be working till 9 o'clock at night and then come in tired and grumpy the next day. That's not doing your kids any favours. I'd say exactly the same to them. Find something that you love that distracts you. Physical exercise. I'm no fitness freak, believe you me. In fact, my PE teachers would be shocked to hear that I do something that's strictly classified as sport on purpose. They would be stunned. But even if it's just a walk, get outside, walk, breathe the air.
So Zoe, you are really clear with your children that homework is very strictly time bound, that this should be a 30-minute task. If you don't get it in those 30 minutes,
leave it.
Do your best, leave it, and then we'll sort those misconceptions, we'll sort that learning. That itself, that knowing when enough is a huge resilience lesson for children, I think.
Yes. Yeah, we can't have them winding themselves up over something that's not going to solve world peace by tomorrow.
No.
It's not right. It's not right for kids to be doing that. They need to do their bit, put their effort in. We all need a decent work ethic. But once it's done, it's done, and then you move on. And if it's not done in that time, you still have to move on. You can't sit making yourself ill over it.
You've given it your best, and that's it now, and move on. That's a really important message to give to them and to your teachers. So again, doing your scour of the school at a certain point, and encouraging them not to be hanging around there till they're easy. How does that go down with them?
Do you know, they're used to it now. At first, I think they were completely weirded out by the fact that I used to go round at about sort of, 5 to 5 and say, I hope you're not going to still be here in 5 minutes. And I do, I throw them out. And I don't do this workplace culture of who's the last person out the door. I think it's deeply damaging. If a member of staff says, look, I could really do with going home to take delivery of a dishwasher, I promise I'll do some work this evening. I don't care, so long as it's done, go. Yeah. Some people prefer to work in the morning. Well, come in the morning then. I do close the school for school holidays though. A little bit they're open in the summer, but other than that, I always have a decent time when the school is properly closed in school holidays, and I just say, nope, you're not coming in. You're not doing it. Now's not the time to be doing your displays. Go spend time with your families.
So you're very much about encouraging building that resilience by proper rest.
Yeah.
Social connection and physical activities.
Yeah, all of those things. It doesn't help anybody to have staff, kids, anybody just not able to function because they're so overwhelmed. We all need to find ways of being able to make it through, because life is tough. I think life is much harder for kids now than it ever was for me when I was at school. I think school life is really, really hard, and you have to be resilient. You have to have these mechanisms that mean that you can get through it, that you can walk away at the end of the day and come back the next day and you are still sane.
And that's right.
Drive you out your tree. It's one of those jobs that's never done, right? And so you can't be the person who's got to tick everything off on your list. I do remember someone saying once to me in their wisdom early in my headship, saying you should make a list of the 3 things you're going to do that day and make sure you do them. Oh, don't be ridiculous.
I think one of the things from my first day of headship would probably still be on that list 13 years later.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. But what I do is take notice of the things that we've done. People get to the end of the day and say, well, I haven't done anything all day. And I think, well, you've been running around like a blue-ass fly. You have been doing stuff all day. Yeah. And so I take note of what I have done, and I'm really careful about that. That's one of my strategies. When I'm packing up at the end of the day and getting changed to go see my horse, I'm there going, right, so today, this is what I have done. It might not have been on the to-do list, but I have done these things and they were important.
And again, the things you've done, I think that reflecting that's quite proven to be a really good boost of resilience, to keep that habit of reflecting of what you've done, what you've achieved, and what impact that has had actually is really, really positive. So that's okay.
So I intended to go and read the head teacher's report. I accidentally ended up playing rounders with year 6 instead, but that was very important.
Okay. Well, if any of your governors happen to either be listening or pick this up on that podcast, I think that's really, really important that they maybe take this lesson of resilience as a key piece of learning for the head teacher's report. Would you agree?
Yes, I do. 100%.
And year 6 would have enjoyed it after the challenges of the reading paper and everything else.
Yeah, but again, we didn't have kids going home in tears. They knew it was hard.
Yes,
but we didn't, because we shouldn't be doing that to 10-year-olds.
And again, a really, really important message. And again, if I was a parent of a year 6 child, I would rather they came home feeling okay after the SAT than they came home reporting that they were definitely going to get a greater depth across the board, because that's a huge resilience message, isn't it? And it doesn't surprise me that the children of Edward Peak weren't as distraught about the reading test. I think that's certainly something that should go on your achievements list.
Thank you. I was proud of them, actually. They were really good. They just rolled their sleeves up, got on with it, and then got on with the rest of the day. I was well impressed with them.
So there's some strong evidence there of building resilience in your children and young people at Edward Peak, which I think is a really great message. And in terms of culture and that being delivered from the top, Zoe, I think that's such a powerful thing. So congratulations and thank you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening on Teachers Talk Radio.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I will speak to you soon. Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. A huge thanks there to Zoe.
This
A huge
programme has
thanks.
been brought to you by the Happy Confident
I'm
Company.
really
This
sorry.
programme
Here
has
we
been
go.
brought to you by the Happy Confident Company.
Oh my goodness. Here we
Our
are.
clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
Thank you. Huge thank you to Zoe there for sharing some of her tips on resilience and talking about how she really leads a resilient school. And again, what comes from the top, what comes from Zoe as head, modelling some of her resilience toolkit, and then is fed down into the teachers and the other staff at the school, and then into the children. So huge thank you to Zoe for sharing that with us this evening. I'd love to hear from anybody else with any of their stories about resilience, anything else that they've got that they've noticed that makes them resilient. One last little shout if there is anything anyone would like to share. And again, I'd like to thank everybody who's joined us in this evening in making ourselves in our talk about becoming more resilient. Last few resilience tips that come from me. So we've talked around a number of things, and Zoe has beautifully spoken this evening about the importance of recognising your achievements, creating that list of what you've done, what you've achieved, but also having a really clear sense of what is good enough. That's enough. Park it, leave it there, go home, go and enjoy that now. And I think in terms of resilience, I really admire Zoe in that, and I think if Zoe models that to her other people as well that she works with, that's a huge strength. And then tie that in, of course, to having physical activity and a hobby that completely takes you away is really, really positive. Some other things that can boost our resilience, just a couple of last ones to finish before we end this evening's Teacher Talk Radio Twilight show. Thinking about having goals. So we've talked about goals on Teachers Talk Radio. We've thought about that first of all. What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? But sometimes when resilient people have goals, even when they see that crises are looking huge and crisis situations are daunting and a problem might seem insurmountable, resilient people are able to view those situations in a realistic way and then set goals to deal with that problem. So again, whatever that's in the way, can you step back, have a look at what the challenges are, think about, brainstorm about possible solutions, and then make a plan to get through that. One of the things that resilient people do. Resilient people also don't just kick it around and just wait for a problem to go away. It's quite often when we wait for problems to go away, it just prolongs the crisis. Instead, resilient people have learnt that it's important to try and start to resolve issues immediately. Don't let things fester. So there might not be a fast or simple solution, but you might be able to break it down, not eat the whole elephant in one go, and break it down into little pieces that will make the situation better and make it less stressful. When you've done that, you can then also be able to actually celebrate those little bits of success that you've had along the way. Claire tells us be vulnerable. Modelling that from senior staff. Yeah, nobody is superhuman just because of their job title. Help people see that it's okay to talk about well-being and resilience. Absolutely spot on. Zoe talked about the problems that can happen when somebody doesn't look after their well-being, talking out that and saying, look, I'm human. This could go wrong for me. This could be really, really difficult for me. And if it is, the impact of that could be great for all of us, is important. Admitting you're human is great. And I think that's really, really important. And again, does take an enormous amount of bravery to admit that little bit of vulnerability. Finally, my final word, I think, on tips and how to build resilience and what to do is about keeping working on it. Because you might have this plan to be more resilient, all these great hopes. I'm going to think more positively. I'm going to look from different perspectives. I'm going to take up a new hobby. I'm going to get away from school on time. And I'm going to really try and put some time into physical activity and looking after myself. But I'm still getting really bogged down with stuff. I'm still not feeling that this is hitting and is really improving my resilience. So it would be easy for someone then to say, well, maybe I'm just not a resilient person. So there's two angles to that. First, do you need to seek a little bit of external support? Do you need to speak and reach a little bit more help for whatever it is that is causing you to have these difficulties and for your resilience not to be getting any better? Reach out, seek support. Talk to friends and family, talk to a medical professional, talk to somebody who leads on wellbeing in your school, talk to a colleague in your network who you trust, who will be able to listen and hold space for you. Do that. That's one thing that can be really, really helpful. But also, resilience might take time to build. If it's something that you really want to work on, don't get discouraged if you're still struggling to cope with problematic events. Everybody can learn to be resilient. Doesn't involve just one cookie cutter set of behaviours or actions. And what resilience looks like in one person might be really different to another. So avoid that comparisonitis. Just keep practicing those skills and those characteristics of resilient people. And remember to build on your existing strengths, because you are amazing before we even start. So thank you all. You have been a fantastic group of people to join us, whether you're some of the ones who are in the studio who are listening, or some of the ones that I can see lurking under the on-air button. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you very much to those who have sent in comments, and a huge thank you to Zoe, who's joined us on the show this evening. Thank you very much. Tonight, I've been Maxine. It's been the Twilight Show on Friday, the 19th of May. We've been talking resilience. Good night.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
No.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at TT Radio.
This programme has...
Can I thank everybody for your kindness with my complete ineptitude with the jingles. I'm going to demonstrate resilience, and I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to admit my mistakes. Thank you once again. You have been fantastic. Here we go.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.